Please be seated. I got it. I did it.
I know, but I just have too many names. But I'm grateful for each of them, so it's a problem. What's your problem?
I got it.
You did, indeed. All right, everyone.
Try to put some bass to it.
Have to give it rhythm. All right, I think we're ready to get moving on the case. I believe there are some matters that need to be placed on the record and brought to the court's attention, and I'm ready for that.
Yes, ma'am. The first matter involves Defense Exhibit 3. If I could, I'm just going to bring the exhibit to the court and show this to you again, Judge. This was the report. Okay. This is the report that Officer Gallimore wrote, took a look at. We had offered that as evidence on Wednesday last week, and the state objected. My understanding now is that Mr. Boring can address this, that the state is going to withdraw their objection. So that I guess we would retender that at this time. But I'm going to ask for a curative instruction to go along with the piece of evidence. I've labeled that.
Well, wait a minute. I understood that this is something that the state hasn't had a chance to look at, and that we were going to wait till the break and let them review it.
Yeah. I've given them a copy, Judge, so just put it on the record.
So, right now I'm going to take it that there's a tender of Exhibit 3, to which I take it there's no objection by the state.
Correct.
All right, and then there's a proposed curative instruction from the defense.
I didn't mark that, Judge.
I know, that's what I was thinking of. And I don't think we need to do that right now. I think you need to hand this over, let them look at it.
They got it.
Okay, at the break, I'll hear from you, and we'll say how to mark it, et cetera, et cetera.
This was a courtesy copy. If you wanted to look at it ahead of time, so you would know what they were asking for.
Okay, that's been taken care of. Now let's go into the other issue.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Harris brought to our attention yesterday that because of the placement of the Mondo screen, he has not been able to see some of the images and the video that has been shown to the jury. And I think the court can take notice of the fact that we have desperately tried with the technology here to be able to see it at our desk. The lawyers have been moving around to the courtroom to see what's on the screen. He's just not been able to see it. And so because of that, we've just made a request this morning, two things. One, that the screen be pushed back for now to a place where he can see it. That way, when he's looking at it, he can talk to us about what it is that's on the screen. And two, we're going to get back with the IT folks here in the building and see if they can do something to cure the problem that we're having so we can see the video and images.
Can we use that?
We're going to check. I asked them to call IT to see what type of capabilities either that screen or this screen could have.
I don't have a problem if you want to use that screen to put it up on the bench and face it out. If that will work. All right.
That's a good idea.
Okay. Well, all right, then I'm not going to mess with this. Everybody, we can do all that? See if it can be done.
Okay.
All right. May I ask this? Could Mr. Harris and Mr. Rodriguez swap places and security-wise with court personnel? Does that pose any problems? That right there would be helpful. and then we'll work on the other piece. Now, what says the state with regard to this?
With regard to that, Judge, I know it hasn't brought the court's attention until right now, so we haven't been able to address it. But I just would like, on the record, if the defendant is satisfied with this remedy, I just want to get that on the record that this alleviates any of his complaints.
Well, all right. For the here and now, I think that's valid, and then we can see if whatever remediation we come up with at the break is acceptable at that point as well. What do you say to that?
Judge, we've tried to work, we have tried to work with this from the beginning. But right now, as long as he can see the screen, we're good.
Well, you need to go ask him.
We've had this conversation. Ross, you're okay if you sit here and see the screen today, right?
I sit there.
Yeah, you sit in the middle right here.
I think so.
Yeah. If
Okay.
he's not able to see it, I'll bring it to the court's attention.
All right. And then we'll work on something additional at the break, see where we can go.
We've got the weekend, so hopefully a couple of days we can get it resolved. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead before the jury comes in, because I'm going to bring them.
Yes,
I do.
All right, well, I'd like the record to reflect that the first that this was brought to the court's attention was this morning, and I'm appreciative that it's been called to my attention. Could we have remediation at this point that is acceptable to the defense? Is that fair to say?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And then Mr. Sharon worked with IT folks, and also this is Judge Kelly's monitor, and Judge Kelly is one of the most knowledgeable people about technology around that I'm aware of. So perhaps an interface with him would be good. Because, I mean, I don't see using his stuff without being nice enough to say please. All right. Is there anything else at this time?
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
Let's bring the jury in.
Let's all rise for the jury, please. Yeah, should be able to see it. Why don't you step come in? Please be seated.
Ladies and gentlemen, Sherry, good morning. It's good to see all of you. Lovely day we have to start off with. We started these schedules starting earlier. I just wanted to re-mention something that I may not have given you enough detail on. We can convene court at 8:30, which we are doing. That doesn't necessarily mean we're going to get you all in the courtroom at 8:30. There are invariably at breaks lots of things that are going on to do with the case, to do with getting it in front of you. You know, practical things. Are the machines working properly? We've had some, problems. Either the courtroom's new to us or different little issues that go on that very often cause delays, because if we can't get the evidence in front of you, there's no reason for you to be in the courtroom, and you never know. I've seen many a trial when everything's queued up to go, like to play a tape that was taken of an interview, and I've seen the lawyers in my courtroom get it all ready, they're playing with it, it's all going. As soon as we get in the courtroom, as soon as the jury gets there, as soon as they push the button, nothing. Absolutely nothing. So there's a lot of work that's going on to make sure that when we go, we're good to go. So when there are delays, please be understanding. It's not that we're sitting around drinking coffee, eating donuts, chit-chatting about the weather and our kids and our pets and blah, blah. No, we are really doing everything we can to get you all in here and present the case to you. We're working really hard to make sure that when you get in here, you can work as well. So, there's been some bits and starts. And Mother Nature has not been our friend. So that's one thing that's beyond anyone's control. And I just wanted you to know that we're on schedule, we're doing what we need to be doing, and I just want to remind you all of that little fact that when there are delays, it's not unnecessary. It is necessary to the proper presentation of this case following Georgia law. And I appreciate your courtesy in understanding that. Let's proceed.
Wesley Houston.
Be seated, please, sir.
Good morning, sir. Good morning. If you could start by introducing yourself to the jurors by giving them your first and last name and spelling it for the court reporter. That's this gentleman seated right here to your right.
Wesley Houston, WESLEYHOUSTON.
Mr. Houston, where are you employed?
Home Depot,
What do you do for the Home Depot?
Corporate Security Officer.
How long have you been an employee of the Home Depot Corporation?
For Home Depot, nearly 2 years.
And what other work experience do you have leading up to the Home Depot Corporation in the area of security?
I used to work as a contract security officer for security management services for Home Depot.
And how many years did you do that work for?
A little over almost a year.
Specifically, what location do you work now with Home Depot?
Work at the Cumberland campus of Home Depot.
What is the street address at the Cumberland campus?
You have three actually. It's 2580, 2600, and 2690.
Could you describe what those three comprise of? What's on each address location?
The treehouse is 2600. 2580 is HR services. 2690 is customer care.
Could you explain to the jury back in 2014 where you were working and how you split your time, what your schedule was like?
In 2014, I was at corporate offices. And at the corporate offices, we have the LAA Little Apron Academy. So if I wasn't working in console in the main building, I would be working in the Little Apron Academy.
What days of the week would you typically be working at the Treehouse location in June of 2014?
Tuesday and Wednesday.
What were your hours on Tuesday and Wednesday?
2:30 to 6:30.
Specifically at the Treehouse location, where would you be stationed during the day?
Front console in the lobby.
Could you give us a little bit of an explanation about the setup of that area?
When you walk in, you walk directly into the lobby area. To the left, or to my left, if I'm sitting looking toward the door, you have a sofa or bench to your left and to your right. You have the console immediately directly in front of the door, and a monitor and TV on your right-hand side by the security console.
And how do employees of the Home Depot Treehouse location enter and exit that facility?
They have to go in and out a turnstile. They have to use their badge to go into the turnstile and exit the turnstile.
Are there records made of those entries and exits?
Yes, it is.
As part of your regular job duties at the Home Depot working at the Treehouse location, did you have regular interaction with the employees on that site?
Yes.
If you could describe what type of employee interaction you had from that console position where you were stationed.
Typically, me, myself, I like to speak to whoever's coming in the building, who's ever exiting the building. So if you came in, how you doing? Good morning, good afternoon, whatever. How you doing? And as you leave, have a great evening. That's just of it.
Back in June of 2014, were there any of the employees at the Treehouse location that you knew by name, either first or last name?
Yes,
And were there some that you did not?
correct. There were some I did not.
And would you say that back during that time, you were familiar with the employees that worked in that building location?
Yes,
Looking around the courtroom, sir, do you see anyone that you recognize to have been an employee at the Home Depot Treehouse location while you were stationed there?
yes.
If you could please tell me where you see that individual and what he's wearing.
To my right, excuse me, brown jacket, brown suit, blue tie.
The gentleman that's standing at this time?
Yes,
All right, sir, you can take your seat. Your Honor, if the record can reflect that the witnesses identified the defendant, Justin Ross Harris.
The record is so reflect.
Thank you, Your Honor. And Mr. Houston, if you could tell the jury about the types of interactions you would have with this defendant, Justin Ross Harris, during that time.
well, with him, it was generally, how you doing? If you came into the building, when you left, have a great evening. That's it.
Was there ever any other discussion about personal life, family, or anything like that?
None whatsoever.
Did the defendant ever engage you in any type of conversation?
No.
Let me ask you about your familiarity with the defendant's family. Going back to your employment with the Little Apron Academy, were you aware that this defendant had a child?
Yes.
If you could explain how you know that.
Well, he would bring his son in, drop him off in the mornings, and I guess he would go to work after that, I can't say where he went from there, but he would drop Cooper off.
If you could explain to the jury, when you worked at the Little Apron Academy, was it a similar setup with a console, or where would you be stationed or work at that location?
I could either be on the bridge, which means he would come in through the B console building, come by the B console or near the B console, and he would go in from kind of like the back way into the Little Apron, or if I was working at the front door of the Little Apron, he would come in from that angle, from that point of view.
During those occasions that you observed the defendant with his child, did you ever see him stay in the classroom for any length of time or spend any extra time with his son when he dropped him off?
No, I didn't.
Taking you back, Mr. Houston, to a specific day, June the 18th of 2014, you have recollection of that day?
I do.
Right. Were you working that day at the Home Depot Treehouse location?
It was.
Okay. And as you were stationed at the console that afternoon, do you recall whether or not you saw the defendant exiting the building on that day?
I did.
Can you tell the jurors what recollection you have about what you saw that day and what conversation you may have had with the defendant on that day?
That particular day, as I said earlier, when people leave the building, I'll say, have a great day, have a great evening, something to that effect. That particular day, when he exited the building, or after he hit the turnstile, get ready to go out the building, have a great day, have a great evening. He said, you too, something like that. He was going to the movies.
Had the defendant ever told you about any of his personal activities before that day?
None whatsoever.
And did that get your attention?
That did.
At some point later, did you then become aware that someone was looking for the defendant, Justin Ross Harris?
I did.
All right. Who did you see, and how did that come to be?
Terrell Dudley came from the Little Apron with a female behind him walking into the treehouse. And that struck me rather oddly because he's across the street at the main campus, and we're, over at the 2600 campus. And when he came in, it was like, wow, something's really wrong because I saw this lady walking behind him, but he had a pretty quick pace about himself, and she was behind him coming into the building. But it was just odd that he was there, so I knew something was wrong with this picture because that's not where he's located at.
At some point, was your attention drawn to the fact that the individual that Mr. Dudley and this woman were looking for was the defendant, Justin Ross Harris?
Yes.
And did you learn the relationship of the female to be the spouse of Justin Ross Harris?
Yes.
All right. Describe what were you doing at the time, and of course, without repeating anything anyone else said, what were you doing to facilitate the request of finding the defendant?
Well, we have a system called ProWatch where we can look a person up. All we need is their name, and so I did that, and I noticed that it was Ross Harris that she was looking for, or that they were looking for, actually.
Does that system bring up a photograph of a person if you type in a name?
It does.
Right. And did you do that on that day?
I did.
At the time that you did that, did you make the connection that the person on the screen that you looked up was the same person you had just seen leave the building?
Absolutely.
All right. If you can tell us, Mr. Houston, about the recording system in that lobby area. Where are the cameras and what do they capture?
The cameras captured the turnstile exiting the building. So you can see a person coming in and going out the building.
And to your knowledge, was there a record made of the recording of the defendant leaving the building that day?
Yes, it was.
Have you had the opportunity to review that video?
Yes, I did.
This time you're showing Mr. Coble. Mr. Lumpkin, what has been marked for identification as states Exhibit 317? I may approach the witness, Your Honor.
Yes.
Mr. Houston, did you have the opportunity before court today to take a look at a blue thumb drive?
Yes, I did.
Do you recognize what I'm handing you now to be a blue thumb drive that you reviewed a video recording on?
Yes.
And does that thumb drive include a record, amongst others, of June 18th of 2014 where the defendant, Justin Ross Harris, exited the building?
Yes.
All right. And is it an accurate depiction of the events that you see there on that date?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, for purposes of tendering with this witness, because the thumb drive has several other recordings, I've informed Mr. Lumpkin we're tendering the actual drive, but I will only be publishing the video clip for which Mr. Houston would be able to testify to at this time.
We have that understanding. I think that's perfectly fine. Maybe with others, that's appropriate.
All right, let's submit it with that limitation.
Thank you. I may have permission to publish to the jury.
You may.
And Mr. Houston, while I'm putting this thumb drive in the system here and queuing it up, when the defendant spoke to you that day when he left the building and told you he was going to the movies, do you recall whether he mentioned the name of who he was going to the movies with?
Yes.
Who was that?
Winston, I think it was. Last name Mullins. I definitely remember Mullins.
Do you see that okay, Mr. Houston?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Is everybody able to see that video clip? What did we just see at that moment?
You saw Mr. Harris exiting the building. You saw he panned to the right a little bit. I spoke, he spoke, and he said he was going to the movies and walked right on out the door.
Mr. Houston, I'm going to test your eyesight right now. This screen's very far from you, but I'm going to ask you, are you able to see the date and the time here at the bottom?
Yes.
Okay, and if you can't, you can step down, if that makes it easier.
it.
All right. Can you tell me the date that is reflected in the bottom here?
6/18/2014.
Can you read the time?
4:15, 27, 28 seconds.
Okay. And Mr. Houston, those records that we spoke of with the turnstile, have you had the opportunity to review those?
I did.
Okay. Just a minute to close this out. Actually, you need to.
Close it. I didn't get to see it. I didn't get over on here fast enough.
I don't mind replaying that portion.
That'd be great if
All
you
right.
would. That's very quick.
And Mr. Houston, actually, I do have a couple of follow-up questions to ask you about the layout. And are you still able to see this okay? All right. And looking here, you have described for us your workstation. It was, I believe you used the word console.
Yes.
Is that going to be over here to the right side of the screen?
It's to the right, absolutely.
And if you could describe for us, looking across, I believe I see a white bench.
Right.
When Leanna Harris came over with Mr. Dudley, where was she in? Was she in this same small area?
Yes.
Where was she spending her time when all of this was going on?
Mostly on that bench.
All right, seated here,
Seated there.
and looking out where the defendant is going out a door. Did Mr. Dudley and Ms. Harris come from that direction or somewhere else?
He came straight in where he's exiting.
Is there anything else of note in this front area that we cannot see?
You have a big screen TV to the right. If you're looking at the very end turnstile, to the right of that on the wall is a big screen TV.
And when you're using your hand, it looks like you're using to the right over here.
Absolutely.
Where Mr. Harris is walking. All right. And you said it's a big screen. Approximately how large is that screen?
Probably 50 or so, if not better, but maybe 50 inches.
Does that monitor stay on all day?
It stays on until we leave. So that was 6:30.
What types of TV or movies or shows or whatever may be on that monitor can you describe to the jury?
Suppose we watch CNN, HLN, but at 4 o'clock, if anybody watches TV and you watch CNN, HLN, or even Fox, I guess, it all becomes a loop. So, me, I got tired of looking at the loops. People want to see weather and traffic, and I want to see something other than just the loops all day. So I would change the channel and put it on Channel 2 News, which is WSB in Atlanta.
On that particular day, do you recall whether you had the local TV station?
We had the local TV station on.
Was the local news playing during the time that the commotion was taking place with Mr. Dudley?
That it was.
All right. And if you could describe for us what was on the TV screen that you saw?
It was breaking news, but we didn't really catch it all. We caught the tail end of it during all the commotion. So once the breaking news came back through again, that's when, we discovered, we put one and one together.
At some point, while you and Mr. Dudley were working at the computer station looking at the records, did you take notice of what Ms. Harris was doing?
Yes.
If you could describe.
She was sitting down at that point. Just, like she was just cold. Like when she walked in, she had emotion. When she, as time passed on, emotions faded away as she was sitting there.
And did that ever change during the time that you were able to observe her that afternoon?
Her emotions?
Yes.
Her emotions changed drastically because when she first came in, she had a whole lot of steam. And as time went on, her emotions died out. It was like, oh well, she was just sitting there like nothing happened. To me, as a parent, you lose a child or you see some breaking news or something, you were full of emotions. She didn't have any at that point. She was just there. And nothing, she didn't say nothing, she didn't scream, she didn't cry, she didn't show any emotion. All she said was...
No, and let's not talk about what she said, but let me ask you a follow-up question to what you just talked to the jury about. During the time that you're making all of these observations, was there conversation amongst the three of you, being yourself, Mr. Dudley, and Ms. Harris, about what was on the TV? Was there a conversation?
The conversation, yes, it was a conversation.
All right. And at some point, did someone from the police department come to the building?
Yes.
Do you recall approximately how much time passed before officers or detectives arrived at that location?
It's hard to say at this point. Maybe 15 to 30 minutes or so.
Did you remain in a close proximity to Ms. Harris during the time that passed before the officers got there?
Absolutely.
All right. And at some point, did the detectives speak with Ms. Harris, or did they take her in an area of the building away from where you could hear her or see?
They spoke with her, but she wasn't too far from me at all times outside of that point with the detectives.
And at some point after she finished speaking with the detectives, did you again have the opportunity to view her as she left the building?
I did.
At any point, did you see any change in the emotions that you observed once the steam had kind of let out?
Nothing. She was still the same at that point.
All right, if I can have just a moment. Thank you, Mr. Houston. Those are all the questions I have.
Okay.
Good morning, Mr. Houston. How are you?
I'm fine. So,
I'm doing great. All right. Just so we're clear, there's at least 2 locations at Home Depot that you work at. Sometimes one being the corporate office and Little Aprons Academy, and then 2 days a week you're at the Treehouse. Did I get that right?
no, because at that point I was not over at the Little Apron. I would see him coming into the Little Apron when I was working at the main campus. So I was transferred over to the Cumberland campus in May of 2014.
So after May, you were no longer working at Little Aprons.
Right.
I got you. Okay, I knew I was confused somewhere, and that helps me understand it. All right. So after May 2014, you only encountered Mr. Harris at the Treehouse, which is on the 2600 Cumberland Parkway.
Right.
And the only places that you recall encountering Mr. Harris before that, over the other campus, was at the Little Aprons Academy. And were those encounters you would have with him, that would be in the lobby area as he brought Cooper to daycare, might be picking him up?
Right.
Never went back with him to a room or down the hallway with him, anything of that nature? No. With regards to his spending time with Cooper and that sort of thing, whatever happened in the room, you weren't able to see it from where you were in the front lobby.
That's correct.
And as far as when Ross would come see Cooper during lunch or other times during the day, would you not be working those times that you would not be able to see him on those occasions? Or you were not? Okay. You ever recall working at a time, probably around Halloween, when there's some sort of parade where the children are brought through the little aprons and they kind of have a little parade of kids dressed up in their Halloween costumes? Okay, so you didn't observe that. And I presume if someone came through your area dressed up as a large Home Depot drill or any of those Home Depot costumes, that's something you would recognize and see, correct?
Absolutely.
You don't recall seeing that ever occur? All right. Now, as you work at the Treehouse in this area, we've got the video up here. Is it a desk or is it like
It's
you're
a
standing there?
console. Now, you can stand if you like, but we generally sit down. But it's a console there.
Okay. And when you say console, that means different things to different people. What do you mean by that?
It's a desk, but it's like a desk and has a husk or whatever you want to call it.
I got you.
But And said we have in our computers there. That's it. Plus the big screen TV.
So as you're sitting here and Ross will be coming by and you're saying pleasantries to him coming and going, he'd be able to see you sitting at that area.
Absolutely.
Very good. And I want to back this up a little bit. All right. This is, are you able to see the time and date still from there? Like 6:18, 4:14, 42 p.m., is that right? Where Ross is at this point in time, would you be able to see him from where you're sitting when he's at that position, do you think?
Yes, you can.
In other words, there's not a barrier or something over here that's off camera that we're missing.
Right.
It's just got that glass front goes across that whole lobby area.
The glass front where you see the black lawn that turns out, that's it, and then the rest of it is an opening to the console.
Okay, very good. And, all right, the camera just doesn't quite go far enough to
It's
catch
a
you.
little picture, right?
All right. And so as you see somebody coming, when that door opens, does it make a sound of any sort?
It chimes.
Okay. So if you're looking down doing something, that would catch your attention so you know somebody's coming through.
Right.
Correct? All right. And then that's when you would engage them with have a great day,
Right.
good morning, good night, what have you.
Right.
Okay? Very good. And it's 4:14:45, is that correct?
Yes.
As that door's opening? Or 14:50 now, we see Mr. Harris has left the camera angle. We can't really see the door, but it does appear as though he's would have hit that door. Go ahead. All right. So you've got 4 or 5 seconds in there that he's in your area, so to speak. Correct? Very good. And what you said to him specifically, do you recall what it was that you said to him this day, June 18th, 2014?
Have a great evening. Have a great day. Something to that effect. That's all I always say.
Very good. And he responded back to you something similar, you too, or something?
You too, and he was going to the movies.
Did you say, do you recall specifically what he said, the specific words?
He said, you too, or you do the same. He was going to the movies with a friend.
Something along the lines of, you do the same, I'm going to the movie with some friends.
Something along there.
Okay. Anything else that you recall specifically?
The name. Last name was Marlon, I think.
Okay. So after telling you he was going to the movie with some friends, you think he named the person he was going with?
Yeah, 'cause we even looked him up on Pro Watch.
Okay. Not then, later.
No, later on.
And did you know that individual when you looked him up? Did you recognize that individual? All right. You're saying you believe it was someone named Mullings.
Something like that.
Okay. Could have been a little bit different, maybe Millings. Does that sound familiar at
I
all?
don't think it was Millis. Could have been, but I don't think so.
Do you recall if Ross gave you a first name at all?
I would say Winston.
Okay. All right. And at the time he's walking through and saying that, doesn't catch your attention at all, other than you're talking to him, correct?
Yes, it did, because he never done that before.
Okay.
It's like a public service announcement. You don't advertise something like that. He just would walk out and, have a great day, you too, something of that nature, and you're gone.
Very good. And but because he told you he was going to a movie with someone named Millings, a friend, that caught your attention as being odd or unusual.
It did. And that was out of his character.
Were you working this post 5 days a week after May of 2014?
Repeat that.
After May of 2014, when you came to that location, were you working this Monday through Friday?
No, I worked that particular building Tuesday and Wednesday,
Okay.
2:30 to 6:30.
So 2 days a week. Tuesdays and Wednesdays. All right.
That's right.
All right. But you recall having seen Mr. Harris on some of those previous occasions coming through and saying goodbye. I guess he didn't say good morning to you because you weren't there anymore.
I wasn't there. Right.
All right. And you would never have been there after the lunch hour at 1 o'clock to see him coming in, coming and going. Was there anybody else there at that location other than you and Mr. Harris working there that day? Not at the treehouse, but in the console, just. All right. And so, this struck you as odd. Did you write it down somewhere, anything like that? Because you thought, gosh, that's so weird. I'm going to make sure I keep track of it.
No, I didn't.
Okay. But you noted it mentally.
I did.
Very good. And so, as you saw Mr. Harris, he appeared to be happy about leaving and going to the movies.
Who would be happy about getting off work?
Absolutely. And especially at 4:14 in the afternoon. You had to work a little bit longer. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
All right. And so, as he walked through and left, did you keep your eyes on him or anything of that nature because of this unusual comment about going to the movies?
No, I mean, I had no need.
No need to watch him?
Right.
And obviously the rest of that day, things unfolded and it became a very unique day in your work there because of Ms. Harris coming to the building and the news that you saw on TV.
Right.
And as you were there, when the detectives came, did they talk to you that day?
They spoke with me, but briefly.
Very good. Did you provide them any sort of written statement or anything at that point in time? Okay. And at that point, were you the one who pulled up the name on the tractor system to assist the detectives, or was that with Mr. Dudley when he came with Ms. Harris?
Mr. Dudley came over.
All right. So when the police came there, did they speak to you more than maybe a minute or two?
They spoke, but it wasn't very long.
And do you recall who you spoke with or how many detectives it was that you were speaking with?
I saw two, but I don't remember who they were specifically at the moment.
Okay. But they were the two who spoke with Ms. Harris, ultimately.
Right.
And at some point in time, were you contacted again by some detectives to talk further about the case?
Yes.
All right. Do you recall how that occurred? Did they call you to come see you?
They reached out to Home Depot, and my manager told me that I needed to speak with Captain, I think it's Captain Fields'
Okay. And so did you meet with them there at your employment?
I did.
All right. Very good. And you spoke with them about these events of this day, correct?
Yes.
All right. And did they ask you, just kind of tell us exactly what you recall about this?
From the interview with the captain.
That's right.
Well, when he interviewed me, we sat down, we talked about the events of the day and how they unfolded. So, the very beginning of it all, you know, I get to work 2:30, I'm sitting there doing my job. Time passes, chase TV. So Harris walks out. We pass, you know, pleasantries or whatever. He mentions he's going to the movies. Okay, fast forward. Mr. Dudley came over to the treehouse again, which I thought was very odd, which I knew something was wrong because, of course, he's working at the main campus again. and he had in tow Ms. Harris. So that right there alone was a red flag. So, after that, we discussed how things unraveled at that point. So, once we determined who we was looking for and the time and all of that, we were still in the lobby. We're still,
When you say we, who
we're talking about myself, Ms. Harris, and Mr. Dudley.
this is back on the 18th.
Back on the 18th.
My question is regarding Mr. Stoddard speaking with you.
Right.
When he interviewed you.
So now with him, it was just he and I there.
Okay.
So,
That's okay.
but while we was talking about the events that, had passed. As I was telling him, when they came, Mr. Dudley and Ms. Harris came to the treehouse. Mr. Dudley had a quick pace about himself. Ms. Harris was in tow, and this is all I'm talking about in the interview. Ms. Harris, she had, like I said, she had a whole lot of steam at the beginning of it all. She was kind of emotional at that point.
If I could stop you just a second, because I want to get to that, but I want to try to keep it in time.
Okay.
Could you speak to Detective Stoddard about this encounter with Mr. Harris?
I spoke with him about that.
Okay. And at that point in time, did you just fail to mention to him this comment about, he said he was going to the movie with some friends, Mr. Millings or Mullins?
Perhaps I did.
Okay.
But I don't think so. I don't think I did, but I'm kind of sure we talked about it at some point.
All right. Do you recall if he was indicated he was recording that interview with you?
He did say, he told me he was going to record it.
All right. And so whatever that recording would show us, that would be, well, you not had a chance to listen to it, I take it, to verify what you said to Detective Stoddard.
Right.
Have you asked to listen to that again before you testify?
The recording.
The recording.
I did listen to the recording.
Oh, you have listened to the
Yes,
recording?
yes,
Okay.
yes, yes.
Do you recall mentioning this comment that you told us was so important to you that you made note of it, about him going to the movies with some friends, maybe Mr. Millings?
I don't know if it's on the, I don't think it's on the recording, but I do remember talking to him about that.
Did you have some conversation with him after he turned the recorder off? Or was that the end of the interview?
At the end of the interview, he turned it off, and I remember talking to Stoddard that day of the occurrence. But on the interview, I'm pretty sure I didn't mention his name or mention that fact you were speaking of. But that day, I remember talking to Stoddard because he gave me his card.
Very good. When he came out on the 18th, and then when he came out later, did that?
Right.
Okay. Very good. All right. Now, let's get back to the latter part after Ross goes out the door and you're just kind of doing your job. I presume there's other people coming and going through the treehouse, correct?
Correct.
At the end of the day, probably more people going than coming, I presume, at that point in time. And you indicated when you saw Terrell Dudley come, you know who Terrell Dudley is before this occasion, correct?
Right.
Is he like one of your colleagues for the same security group you'd be working with, or?
He's an employee of that Little Apron Academy.
Okay. You know what he does for them?
I think he's some sort of assistant. I don't know his direct title.
That's fine. And the lady that was with him, you did not know who she was.
Not at all.
But you noted that his coming over seemed odd, so something was up. And you apparently noted something about her demeanor, that she seemed to be upset, excited, something. How would you describe what you saw?
In the beginning, she was, like I said, she was emotional. She was like, "Where's Ross? Where's my kid? Where's Ross?" As any parent, would be at that point.
And at some point after that, I take it, she's sitting on this bench,
Right.
and you've got the TV on with the local news on, correct? And you recall there being a story about what's happened to Cooper Harris on that TV screen as she's sitting on that bench?
At the tail end of the first clip, we just got a glance.
Right. Get that story.
We didn't get the story.
Okay.
Now, when it came back around, we got the full story. And she was sitting down and
And was it after that that you saw her emotion change?
her emotion was changing as time was going on. It was going by. She went from hot to not to me.
Sure, sure.
So-
And that was as she was sitting there on that bench looking at that TV that's right.
Absolutely.
And you saw her emotion get to the point where she seemed very under control?
She was very much in control at that point. She didn't do anything.
Very good. And you weren't conversing and you weren't having a conversation with her about what she was thinking at that point in time, correct? I think you said as the detectives finally came and spoke with her, did they speak with her right there in that area? Did they take her somewhere away from where you were?
They walked outside for a moment or two.
Did they come back in?
They came back, she came back, and then they left. Or they went back outside at least. And when all she asked for at that point was...
Without going into what she said right now, my question, did it ever just take her into the building and kind of get to a room? Or they talk
They may
about it?
have. They may have, but I was more focused on other events. I still have my job to do.
Sure, sure. So you just don't know if they went in or not?
If they did, they could very well have went in. I can't answer that.
Well, as a security officer, you would have had to let them in because they didn't have badges to get in, correct?
Yes, this is true.
Okay. Do you remember letting them in?
I don't. I really don't.
Okay, fair enough. But you do remember them going outside with her, so.
Right.
And then coming back in to the foyer area, and then maybe going back out with her again. At some point, she left, obviously.
She left with them at the end of the day.
Very good. So as you're sitting here, you don't have any recollection of that ever went inside, past these glass doors, or that you let them in?
I don't, but they could have very well been let in by myself or maybe somebody else. But at the same time, again, it's so much going on that day, and I still have my job to do,
Sure.
and I still got to make calls and tell my upper management team what's going on, what's happening, and let them know so they can start doing what they need to do.
Your afternoon became very busy.
Hectic.
Very good. And it could be you just forgotten if that happened, if you let them in or not.
This is true.
All right. Okay. After that meeting with Detective Stoddard, after the event, did you meet with any detective again thereafter, talking about the case? And prior to coming to the court today or yesterday, whenever you had to travel to get down here, you not had any discussion with anybody else about this event as far as talking to the police or the district attorney's office or investigators involved in the case? All right, very good. Just one second. between your seeing Ms. Harris go to the detectives that day and when you actually met with Detective Stoddard to do the interview, were you kind of seeing the events that you had a part of unfolding on the news?
Repeat that.
That's a very bad question. Did you see the news about Cooper Harris's death on the news in the days in between the 18th and when you were interviewed by Detective Stoddard?
Did I actually watch that again, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Or the news about it?
News coverage, hearing about it, all that sort of stuff. Or did you just tune it out?
Kind of tuned it out, really, because that was emotional for me
Okay.
to witness that death of a child in a car. That was hard for me.
Sure. So you didn't watch any news about it, didn't know anything more about it?
Didn't want to know anything more about it.
Fair enough.
That was too much for me as it was.
And so when you had a chance to listen to your interview, when was that?
Today,
Today, what you got? Did you come down this morning or come down yesterday?
came down late yesterday. I listened to it this morning.
All right. And is that when you had a chance to meet with the DA's office to kind of prepare you to testify today?
Yes.
All right. And so you got to listen to that interview. Were you able to look at any other notes that you had or anything like that? Okay. All right. And since the time that you met with Detective Stoddard, have you ever seen him again since then?
No.
All right. And okay, that's all I have right now. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Mr. Houston, I want to direct your attention to something real quick on the screen one more time. If you don't mind. All right, sir. You see that okay still?
Yes.
All right. Could you step down for just a moment? Show us again where you would be sitting at this point when the defendant is walking out of the building.
I'm over here in the black.
And can you see the defendant okay in this image?
Yes, I can.
What side of his body are we looking at?
The right side.
All right. And when you spoke to the defendant, was he walking in this direction?
He was walking. See where he is? The door is right here. So he's walking to the door.
What side of his body would be facing you as you spoke to him?
He's right.
Did he ever have any trouble hearing you?
No objection. He can't speak to his trouble hearing. He can speak to what he observed.
Mr. Houston, did you ever observe anything about the defendant's interactions with you that led you to believe he could not hear you speak to him when you left the building?
I did.
Thank you.
You can see. It's pretty close.
He was in.
And as we see on the video, he turns towards you when y'all are having this exchanging of pleasantries, correct?
Correct.
Right there, out the door. Correct? About 3 seconds. Is that right? 4:14:45, 4:14:48.
Okay.
Nothing further.
You can get sleeves, thank you, sir. Next witness.
Statement called Ray Yeager.
I did.
Sir, would you please introduce yourself to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury by telling them your name and spelling it so the court reporter gets it right?
Sure. My name is Ray Yeager, Y-E-A-G-E-R. Previously was employed as a detective with Cobb County Police Department, retired in January of 2015, and am now a part-time reserve officer with them.
And how long did you work in law enforcement before you retired?
About 31 years.
In law enforcement, what type of, positions did you hold over the years in law enforcement?
I have positions as a road officer, uniform patrol, in training. I was also part of a special operations motorcycle unit, and the last 7 years I was in high-tech crime investigations.
When you started out, where did you start out in law enforcement?
I started out in the city of Miami Beach. I was there about 20 years. Then I went to Cobb County. I was there 13 years.
During your time in Cobb County, you said that your last 7 years you did high-tech investigations, correct?
Correct.
And was this at Cobb County Police Department?
It was at Cobb County, yes.
Okay. Tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury about what the high-tech unit does at the Cobb County Police Department.
The high-tech crime unit was a squad that would take in, do forensic analysis of digital devices. That includes cell phones, iPads, iPods, computers, gaming systems, anything that had data on it that could be stored digitally on the device, on an electronic device. And as part of that unit, we would then take that stuff into evidence. We would then look at those devices and do an analysis based on the type of crime that was committed. That would be the type of evidence that we'd be looking for on those devices.
How did you, I guess for lack of a better term, how did you get into that?
Well, concurrent with my law enforcement in Miami Beach was a part-time position in patrol. Concurrent with that, I spent 33 years in the information technology industry, and that was the basis of my knowledge in digital forensics and electronic digital devices.
And did you go into college? Did you do college for information technology and stuff like that, or is it something you just got a job and you started learning and working on the job?
As a matter of fact, I'm very old, so I started a long time ago with an associate's degree in electronic data processing technology back in 1968. That was the beginning of my career in information technology. Subsequent to that, I got a bachelor's degree in statistics and a master's degree in public administration.
Could you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury a little bit about what, if any, training you've had in forensic analysis of computers and things like that, as far as leading up to getting into the Cobb County Police Department's high-tech unit, and then after it, I guess, keeping up with the new trends and things?
The initial experience I had was my information technology experience prior to coming with the police department, with the Cobb County Police Department. Subsequent to joining the department and going into the high-tech crimes unit, I was then got training with vendors, specific vendors that provided forensic software for us to use in the department. Also had training with the Secret Service, the FBI, and other local and state law enforcement agencies. And
this training, did this involve the extraction and analysis of computers and cell phones and things of that nature?
Yes, it did. The training would include use of the forensic software tools, but it would also include the documentation and disassembly of computers or cell phones as well.
Can you even estimate to the jury how many different examinations you've done over your career as far as technology and devices like that?
In the 7 years that I was in the high-tech crime squad, I did probably approximately 500 cases involving either a cell phone, a computer, some other digital device, or multiple devices on a single case.
Your Honor, I tender Detective Yeager is an expert in the field of forensic examination and analysis of technology.
No objection.
Ms. Testify.
Now, Detective Yeager, turning your attention back to June 18th of 2014. I guess for you, maybe it starts June 19th, 2014. Were you working in the high-tech unit for the Cobb County Police Department then?
Yes, I was.
Okay, and what was your role there with that? Were you just a detective within the unit?
Yeah, I was a detective in the unit, one of 4, I believe, at the time, and was involved in doing primarily computer forensics, but would also do cell phone forensics because they take less time, and rather than just letting them sit and waiting for another computer case, we would fill in doing those jobs as well.
Okay. On the 19th of June 2014, did you become involved in the investigation of the death of child Cooper Harris?
I did.
Okay. And what was your involvement initially on the day after his death?
I was assigned to coordinate the analysis of all the devices that were brought in on that case. And there were quite a few devices. There were phones, iPads, and computers as well.
So you were kind of the point man as far as when those things, I guess, were submitted. You decided who was going to do what to them just initially. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And because of the number of the devices, did you kind of have to prioritize after speaking with detectives about what you were going to start with and things like that?
Right, we did.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about, first of all, acquiring information or extracting information from, let's start with computers, laptops, things like that. When you do a search of a computer or even like a cell phone, are there different types of searches you can do or levels of searches?
There are, let's talk about cell phones first.
Mm-hmm.
The product that we use is called Celebrite, and it has about 90,000 installations across the world.
Is that a common tool that is used with law enforcement, I guess, throughout the world as far as extracting and analyzing information gathered from phones?
It is. It's used by law enforcement at the local, state, and federal level. It's also used by the military. It's a tool that is pretty much the gold standard in analyzing cell phones.
Okay. So tell us about that, then, using Celebrite or whatever tool you use to analyze the data on a phone and the levels you can do.
Sure. There's really 3 levels that when you get a phone, you can look at 3 types of extractions of a phone. And the extractions will depend on the model, the manufacturer of the phone, first of all, the model of the phone, the release level of the hardware on the phone, the software release level that's on the phone, as well as the vendor that provides the phone, whether it's AT&T, Verizon, Sprint, etc. So all of those are parameters that decide what you're able to do. And what will happen is after we've documented all the information that we can externally on a device, like serial numbers and the amount of memory, we'll then attach it to a Celebrite device. And what that will do is, once you make the attachment, it's an intelligent connection, and Celebrite will let you know, let me as the analyst know, what kind of extraction Celebrite is capable of doing for that device. And there's really 3 levels. There's a logical level. And basically is, if you pick up a phone and you can look through and see things that are on the phone, you can see icons, you can see messages, you can see call logs, things of that nature. That's called a logical acquisition. And that is probably the lowest level that you can do on a phone, and most phones you can do that with, as long as you have the PIN to access the phone. Some of them, if you don't have the PIN, Celebrite is still able to get into to analyze the data.
How does an iPhone play into that as far as ease of getting into it if you don't have the passcode?
It all depends on the software, the hardware level, whether it's a 4, 5, 6, 7, 5S, etc. So it depends on the level of that as to whether or not you can get into a phone with or without a passcode. And that's a function, it's not the function of the analyst, it is a function of the Celebrite system itself.
Okay.
To interject, I do believe that Celebrite was the company that did the encryption in the San Bernardino case, where Apple refused to do it for the federal government. Celebrite came in and was able to do that for the FBI. So, as I said, they're the gold standard. So, those things that they develop as new systems or products come out, they will develop enhancements to the product that we as analysts or as purchasers of their product will receive when we get new updates. So a phone that maybe we couldn't get into 6 months ago, we may get a new release from Celebrate, and they are now able to get into that phone. So we would be able to then extract the information off that phone today that maybe we couldn't do 6 months ago because of a release.
And with the, you said you started with the logical, looking at the phone, being able to get things. What's the next step?
The next step is a file system, and what you get then is you're able to access all the files. A phone is just a little computer, and it has an operating system in it. So you can then, as a file system acquisition, you can get to all the operating system files as well as hidden files for the operating system. Okay. Then the next level is what we call a physical. That doesn't use any of the structure of files or operating systems. What it does is it just extracts. It goes from, if you have 16 gigabytes of memory in a phone, it goes from byte 0, or the first character, and it goes to the 16th gigabyte, the very last byte, and it just extracts every one of those into a file. And at that point, it doesn't care about file structures. Then that physical extraction is taken, and there is a program that knows, that has intelligent logic within it that says, what does a message look like? What does a call log look like? What does a phone call look like? What does a query to the internet look like? So it knows what the definition and what the structure is of each one of those pieces of data. Then it goes in and starts at the beginning and says, I'm looking for everything that looks like a call log. Goes all the way through there and says, finds everything that looks like a call log, and then creates an output that says, this is the call logs that I found on that phone. Then it'll go in and say, I want to find everything that looks like a message. It knows the structure of a message. It goes in from the beginning to the 16 gigabytes, and it looks through everything that looks like a message, creates a report, says, these are all the messages. And it goes through that iteration over, looking for all the different artifacts that could be on your phone that is data that's on the phone.
Okay. And could you do that on an iPhone?
You can. Again, it depends on the model, the vendor, and the software level.
Okay. And back in 2014, June 18, 2014, when you did this, which type of search did you guys use, and why did you use it?
There was an iPhone 5S that belonged to the defendant, and what we did was a logical extraction on it. It's called an advanced logical because it looks at whether or not there is a PIN that isn't known by the analyst, or if the phone has been jailbroken. And the phone that's jailbroken just means you can put applications onto an iPhone that Apple would normally let you put on. Okay, so it allows you other methods than just logical, but it's called advanced logical because it takes into consideration the status of the phone in doing that logical acquisition of the information that's on the phone.
Okay. Now, with computers, can you describe to the jury what type of search is, how you analyze a computer or a laptop as opposed to a cell phone?
On a computer, the first thing we'll do after we've documented it, we will attach a computer to what is called the write block. Well, let me back up. We'll take the hard drive. Every computer has a hard drive in it. And we will remove the hard drive from the computer if it can be removed. And then we will attach it to what is called a write blocker. And this is a physical piece of hardware that says that any requests to write to this disk drive will go through the write blocker, and they will be intercepted and not allow those requests to be written to the hard drive. Okay, so it pretty much just intercepts them and then throws them away so that they can't be written to it. So when we attach it to the write blocker, then we attach that write blocker to a computer. On the computer, there's a piece of forensic software called EnCase. It's written by Guidance Software. Then what happens with the EnCase, we'll read the hard drive, the suspect hard drive that we want to look at information on, and it will read that from the very first record on the hard drive to the very last record on the hard drive. Again, it'll do what we call a bit-for-bit copy. So all the ones and zeros that are on that hard drive will get copied to another disk that we're going to work with. Okay? And when it copies each record goes through a hashing algorithm that gives you a unique, it's called hash code, and every time I read, I should get that same hash code. Okay? It does that for every record on the suspect disk. So then when it writes it to the disk that we're going to be working with, every time we read that disk, every time we start it up, it reads every record and compares it to the MD5 hash that we calculated when we write it off the suspect drive and says, this is the same data that we got off the drive, and it does it every time we look at that drive.
So is that a way just to cross-check and make sure nothing's happened to the image or anything that you're investigating? Make sure it's an exact copy.
Yes.
And can you go back and verify that and look at it just to make sure later and say, yes, the hash value?
Yeah, you can do verification on the copy disk to verify that all the MD5s are correct.
I'm sure probably some people in here are zoning out because it's getting.
I apologize.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I'm kind of zoning out. I'm not real smart, so. Let's talk about something simple.
It's all written down either way.
Yes, sir. If is there a difference between the amount of information on like a 16 gig cell phone, not a like wall phone, versus a laptop or something like that?
Yes. Cell phones, you probably can get up to around 64 gigabytes on a cell phone. Gigabytes is billions of characters. Okay, so it's 16 billion characters. On older computers, you're probably in somewhere around 100 to 500 gigabytes. So we're talking about billions of characters. On new computers, you have drives that are terabytes, and terabytes is trillions. And if you know what our national debt is, our national debt is 20 trillion. You can get.
Are you making a political statement?
I'm not. I'm just trying to equate it for the jury to.
Yeah, I understand.
The number of characters.
Yeah.
So you have if you have a 1 terabyte drive, you have 1 trillion characters that can be stored on that drive. So newer computers are coming out with 1 to 6 terabyte drives because there's a demand for more and more storage because of the things that we do in our everyday life. We do videos, we do pictures, and those take a lot more space than, say, a Word document, which may be a resume or a letter, which won't take as much space. So we're doing a lot more things casually in our life, so we have a demand for more storage on our computers. So computers have a lot more storage because of that, and therefore take a lot more time to process.
And before you actually go in and do analysis and extractions, do you do anything to document the devices that you are going to analyze?
Yes. When we receive a device, and we'll receive it through a chain of custody and evidence, we will document everything that we can see externally about a device. We'll take pictures of it. We will get serial numbers. We'll get capacities. We will get anything that's written. If you look on the back of your iPhone, down on the back, on the bottom, it gives you a model number. It may even tell you how much storage is in it. So we'll document all that in writing as well as document it with pictures. Once we do that, then in the case of a phone and or computer, phones can also have SIM cards in them, and they can have storage cards in them. They can have SD cards in them for additional storage. We will take those out, we'll document the serial numbers on those, and also photograph them. In case of a phone, if it can be taken apart, we will take it apart. We'll remove the battery, get any serial numbers that are inside the phone. That isn't the case with an Apple phone. Apple is sealed, and they don't like anybody to take them apart but Apple. So we'll document everything. In the case of a computer, the same thing. Before we take the hard drive out, we'll take the panels off. We'll photograph the inside of the computer from all angles. Document any other serial numbers that are in either hard drives or any other devices of interest that may be in the computer. So at that point then, we've documented everything that we can see visually before we even start doing any analysis or extractions on the device.
Going back to June 19, 2014, what was your shift back then? Did you come in the morning?
Yeah, I was on day shift. I was, 7 to 3 or whatever it took to get the job done that day.
So when you came in early that morning, was this an investigation that was ongoing and I guess very fluid?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Were there a lot of moving parts in between detectives and employees in your division and things like that?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. And I know you stated that you were assigning different detectives or making sure, certain persons were going to do this and that. When you usually in your job as a forensic expert, are you the person who goes in and not only extracts it and then combs through it for evidence, or is that something left to the detective to do later?
That all depends on the size of the case. Generally, what we will do is we will get the request. In the case of a phone, because we're limited in storage capacity, the amount of data that we get off the phone we can usually extract, create the report, and provide the report to the investigating detective for them to go through. And the reason we do that is because they are more familiar with the intricacies of the case rather than I am, where they've just handed me a phone and says, hey, I need everything off of this. About the only time we won't do something like that is if we have a consent search. Let's say we have a victim who comes in and says they were a victim of being sent a pornographic picture or a threatening message. And all we're trying to do is get that one picture or that one message. What we will do then is just extract that piece of information, which we can do, just extract separate pieces, and then provide that to the victim to be provided to the investigating detective. So we do that out of respect for the victim and not to have them waiting for 2 days while we try to acquire everything on the phone as a matter, because that's what we do. Okay, we want to make it convenient for them so that their cooperation isn't hindered by us, making them sit around for 2 days.
And when you're doing these things, are you asked by the detectives, and do you have the capability, like you just said, of doing a limited search for something just right off the bat? There's a ton of information, devices. Sometimes they ask you, hey, can you just go look at this?
Yes, we can do that.
All right. In this case, just starting generally, what was your role or the high-tech's role? Was it to generally to just acquire all the information and get it to detectives, or was it to actually pour through everything on every computer that was relevant to the case?
Primarily what we were trying to do was acquire everything as quickly as we could so that we could get it into the hands of the detectives so that they could start pouring through it to look for evidence in the case.
Now, in this case, when these devices were brought to you, what did you start doing with them initially? Was it the assignment, was it cataloging them or assigning them, or kind of what did you do first?
Well, as they would come in, I would catalog them as to, the evidence control record number and the serial number, what the device was, and then start cataloging it. Because along with the device, before we can even look at a device, we have to have a search warrant to look at the device. Because of the fact that we want to follow the Constitution, and I don't want to be stepping on somebody's rights by looking at something that we don't have the authority of the court to do.
When you look at a search warrant, you look at basically what the search warrant allows you to look for.
Generally, what we're looking at is what is the crime, okay, and is there anything specific that they want us to look for? Okay. Because a lot of times, for instance, unfortunately in child pornography cases, they will have a hash value of a known picture of child pornography, and they may want us to just find that one picture quickly. Okay, so given the hash value, we can enter that hash value into the extraction and find that picture rather rapidly if we had to. But generally, in this case, what we would do is, because we had such a volume of devices, we wanted to just acquire them, create the reports of the smaller devices, so that the detectives that were doing the investigation could then go in and look at those for information that might be relevant or information they may have had from interviews.
Now, once you get this, when you do an extraction, what do you do? How do you get the information to the investigating detective? Like, what type of format do you put the information on?
The format comes out in a report, and it's, if the jury's familiar with web pages, it kind of looks like a web page, so that you can scroll through things, rather than creating a printed report that you would just have to scroll through and look at as you would say a report. Okay. Well, it's like a web page which has links to it that will say, okay, it'll have a thing that a label that will say contacts, and you click on that, then it will take you to all the contacts that we found on that phone. Okay. Then it may say messages. You click on that and go to all the messages. And then within the messages, let's say you wanted to look at web searches. So there's a label that says web searches. And it may not say that specifically in this case, but it's just an illustration. You go to web searches, and it will say all the websites that were visited, either by being keyed in or by clicked on, that were done on this device. So it's a report that is in what we call HTML or web format, so that it's easily reviewable by the investigating detective without having to scroll through 3,000 pages of data. It also provides a capability where they can actually do searching through the data that's on that, and it'll usually be provided to them on an optical disc, either a CD or a DVD or a Blu-ray, depending on the size of the report. So that's the method that it'll be presented to them. On occasion, if they say, I just want contacts, or I just want phone calls on a particular day, we will then print that out as well as give it to them on an optical disc as well.
Okay, great segue. On June the 19th, 2014, that first day, what was the first device that you dealt with and did an analysis or an extraction on?
It's probably a good time to invite.
Yes, ma'am.
Ladies and gentlemen, close your notepads, keep an open mind, no conversation, have a good break.
All right. Watch your stuff going down.
If council could vote, I'm going to tell y'all, just to let you know.